Addiction never affects just the addict. It affects all of us. Recovering from addiction and alcoholism is also a life-changing battle for families dealing with a loved one's addiction. Numerous programs support addicts as they reclaim their lives, while their families face their own challenges without the same guidance. You're listening to Voices in Courage with KL Wells, where we transform the lives of the families and loved ones of addicts and alcoholics from surviving to thriving in the midst of chaos. Tune in as we highlight vulnerable stories of families who have addicted relatives and friends and learn how they have dealt with the challenges of isolation, desperation, and shame. If you are seeking ways to live your best life, then we welcome you into this safe space. Be a part of change today with your host, KL Wells.
Hi, this is KL Wells with Voices in Courage, and I am again joined by Andy Graham, who I came to adore and love in the very first interview that we did. We had an amazing conversation that is born out of his journey, my journey, and living in the world of corporate America, and how getting cracked wide open can reinvent you if you show up to take the opportunity. And so I would strongly encourage those of you that have not listened to the podcast from, I believe it's March 28th, which was the first interview, go back and listen to it, because as I've listened to it again, it is a gem worth listening to. So I'm thrilled to have Andy back today.
Well, thank you. You're very kind. I really appreciate the microphone, if you will, to share some of the things that are part of my story. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you would, for those of you who didn't listen to the original podcast, if you could just kind of give the CNN version of your story, and then we're going to leap into the deep end.
Farm boy with a marketing degree from South Carolina. I grew up with dirt under my fingernails, learned how to work hard, and came from a broken home. Learned how to fend for myself as a survivor. Started out a career in sales in the technology area. Spent 20 years in the semiconductor industry. Started a not-for-profit that was reconciling industry standards. That was an impossible problem to solve. And got to rub elbows with a lot of C-level folks doing that to create industry consensus. Did a venture-backed startup, which is a completely different domain, early in the space of mobile phone applications and fitness. We sold that company to Adidas in 2009, and I commuted to Germany for 3 years with global brand marketing with that. And most recently, I ran a consumer packaged goods company that was selling high-end air purifiers for schools, businesses, and I ran that through the pandemic, which was quite a challenge. To run any kind of business through the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And then along the way, had 3 adult children with a wife of 40 years. She still likes me, thankfully. And my oldest daughter is a bipolar schizoaffective, has been for the last 15 years. And then our middle son is recovered cocaine addict and is on that journey. And I just became a grandfather for the first time in January, and thrilled to death about it.
Oh, congratulations.
My youngest daughter. So it's an amazing thing.
Wow. That's so awesome. Great. Okay. So we came together through a mutual friend who we both adore and love. We had a full ranging conversation last time. And what I'm really interested in terms of diving into the deep end, is you kind of self-identified through the course of this journey and yourself getting cracked wide open, that you began to learn that you are, in fact, sensitive. My experience in working with CEOs and C-suite, men in particular, is that a lot of them are, but they haven't felt they've had permission to be themselves.
That's true. It's really a scary curtain to come out from behind of. And on the one hand, it's a relational superpower, because you can you have ground penetrating radar when it comes to being around people and reading the room and sensing other people's emotions and this sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And you get a touch that you just wouldn't have otherwise, and comes naturally to you. But it's a scary thing, because the there are some stereotypes that just don't jibe with that in the corporate world.
Mm-hmm. And so I'm imagining, I'm imagining and checking in with you on this, Andy, is when you began to realize and actually own your emotional sensitivity out of how you had lived for so many years. Number one, yes, scary, terrifying, unknown, all the things. How did you actually navigate this? Because I think I just finished the book called The 5 Acts of Courage. And the very first act is to feel, because I don't believe that our culture has given us permission. Most Americans can identify 3 feelings: happy, sad, and angry. And so I'm super curious to know kind of your journey in discovery for yourself.
We're told things like boys don't cry. We're told we get a lot of messages that say put those things away early on. And I remember somewhere along the way feeling hurt in a way when I was much younger and making a conscious decision that I would lock those things away, that they were painful and hard to understand and dangerous to bring out because of how it felt. Mm-hmm. So I literally, just like in the movie Apollo 13, I went and turned off the limb and flipped all the switches off, and it just basically was dormant there for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And what you find is that it is impossible to just go back in and flip those switches on again. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't work that way, because it creates voids that are like missing pieces that you just can't. It had to happen at a certain time. And so now you're going to have to go back and recover that a different way. Mm-hmm. And so for me, as a husband and a father, you have an idea in mind of what that should look like, right? And as a provider, right? And and as men, you want to be able to figure out what does success and winning look like in those contexts, right? And that sort of thing. And so when the picture that's emerging doesn't meet that, as in my case with what happened with my 2 adult kids, and the fact that I had shut myself down emotionally and treated myself pretty much like an object, you could call it a classic case of burnout, but it was really hitting the wall over all of those things, and my marriage, with my kids, with my career, all of those things in various stages came to a grinding halt and forced me to go back and look at what was really going on, what was really driving me. Right. And that takes feeling a lot of layers to get at. And it's not like something that you go into a phone booth and figure out. Right.
Right.
And I think the problem is as men, we like to solve problems. And this is one that has so much complexity that it just does not reward. It's not rewarded by self-help. It's not rewarded by, 5 things. It's not rewarded by reading Atomic Habits. It's not awarded. It's not rewarded by a lot of the things that you would. It's not rewarded by a checkbook. It's not rewarded by, all the tools that you would typically grab. And the difficult thing is there's no timeline on it. You can't really say it's going to be over then. Right. And so the nature of that uncertainty is a difficult thing. But one of the things I strongly agree with Steve Jobs on in his Stanford commitment speech is that you can't connect the dots looking forward, only backwards. And so it's when you have enough of a journey into that space of, okay, who are you really? And what was really driving you? What were you really thinking when you made certain decisions? Why did you really make that decision? Right. And so forth. Things start to emerge that over time where you can start to put enough of the puzzle pieces together to say, and it's not enough to know it. It's you. Once you know it, then you have to start trying that out and testing it out. And one of those challenges, if you're in a marriage relationship, is even with your marriage, you'll find that the courage you have in the in your corner office is not the courage you have at home.
That's right.
And that's where it'll be tested. When you become the real you, it's going to be tested there first, right?
Right.
And then it'll be tested in other places in your relationships, right? So for me, once I started to understand and embrace how sensitive I was, the people that were most receptive to that, for me working that out, were my adult children. Literally, they were the ones who I worked that out with and could have honest conversations with and help piece the puzzle pieces together because they knew me, right? Knew me in a way that I didn't even know me, And so that was really a key entry point for me to get some feedback, because think about it. If you're not connected to yourself emotionally, your feedback loops are broken. They're just broken. It's not like you don't care. You're not listening. There's no there, right? So your kids, when they become your adult friends and they trust you and there's a level of safety in that relationship, they will say things to you that you can receive that you couldn't receive from anybody else. Couldn't receive it from your couldn't receive it from your boss, can't receive it from a board member, right? They just have a level of access that for me proved to be, and it can be a friend. I've had friends that have a key to that lock and do the same thing. But you have to find someone that you feel safe enough to really fully confide in as a witness to what you're experiencing and give you feedback that is not judgmental. It's not advice giving. It's not patronizing. It's not get over it. It's at the very bare minimum, it's witnessing you work it out, right? With someone. Because even the act of saying what you're saying takes courage to just give voice to it, right?
Yeah. And so I think about that through the lens of holding the space. And it sounds like your kids held the space for you to step into this part of your life in terms of discovery.
It's true. And there were other friends that I would meet with and still do going on 8 years now regularly, where the explicit objective is to understand more deeply the spiritual life. How deep does the rabbit hole go? In order to know that, you have to be incredibly vulnerable with one another as men about everything. And so that has become a safe space for me and for them as well, to talk about that journey and what we're experiencing and what we're discovering, and starting to compare notes on that. And it's not like we're reading a textbook and going chapter by chapter.
Right.
We show up without an agenda and go, okay, here's what's going on. The other two will listen to that and then literally be prompted by what is coming up for them to say, what I'm seeing here. So you just have to have those safe spaces, and you've got to have feedback loops at a minimum, I think, to develop the kind of self-awareness that you're talking about here.
And so it began with your kids, and then it expanded to your men's group.
A number of groups, right? So like I think I may have mentioned in the last podcast, for the last 10 years, I've built motorcycles rebuilt motorcycles in my garage with a group of guys that show up, usually every Thursday. It becomes yet another safe space where you can work out these kinds of things as well. There were a number of communities for me, fortunately enough, and I have a couple of mentors who are, older than me. Like one of them's 80 years old now, but he's like the busiest 80-year-old right now.
That's great.
And then I have another one who's 74, and both of them have poured into my life. And what happened is they started out as mentors, but then they became friends. And then I began to understand that I was as much of a contributor and a blessing to them as they were to me, right? So through that circle and satellite of relationships is a number of spaces where I was able to go again, get a better sense of who I was, and by the reflection of other people.
Right. And I mean, the research is all about one of the top 3 reasons that we are mentally healthy and can navigate this planet is community. To be able to broaden your community, and you are in the process of writing a book right now, which is about safe cultures, which I just love because I can see kind of how the steps might have been put together to create this book that you're in the journey of creating right now. So safety, psychological safety, community safety, intimacy on a truth-telling level, I do think is part of the journey of this whole experience with addiction.
It is, because addiction is essentially supercharged shame. I mean, it is really supercharged shame, and you want to get out from under that in any way that you can. So yes, I agree with what you're saying.
And so I am curious to take it kind of to the next space in the way that I think about things in. This has been a place at one of the pieces to the puzzle of your self-care and you doing your work, as Scott challenged you to do. I loved rehearing that, and super powerful. And so I'm wondering what other things you do to take care of yourself in the midst of all of this. How do you still at this point in the journey navigate kind of the emotional maybe ups and downs of this? And then again, do you consider yourself in the thriving space now? I
do. I think that life is a gift, not about gain. So I've made that shift to, every day is a gift, and you see what life has to unwrap for you, and it's life's not happening to us, it's happening for us. Right. And so, and as I say, one of my lines in the book that I say is that the best in us among others will come out of the woods when the meadow is made safe. The way I've done that for myself is, for one thing, if you've shut your emotions off and now you're becoming reacquainted with them, it's going to be strange.
Yeah,
you can feel things in a way and not quite know how to put them on the pegboard, and you're going to feel a little crazy, like a little bit like, okay, well, what's wrong with me? This sort of thing. Just cataloging or labeling, I should say, your emotions of this is really that, right? And for guys, I'm going to say, for me, I would say a lot of those emotions really funnel down to hurt. And once you could say really what's underneath the anger, what's underneath the sadness, what's underneath depression, what's underneath each of these things, right? More often than not, it was some level of form of hurt, right? And the thing is that we become complicit in hurting ourselves, right?
Right.
And the problem with C-level executives is they have a bigger transmission than most people, and what that means is they can grind the gears for longer, further, and create and damage themselves even more than the usual. They can flip on Netflix and not worry about tomorrow, right? And it can be really painful. And so I did that. I burned up the transmission. So one is you've got to be able to find a way. I find a way is to be patient and curious about what you're feeling, and give yourself the space to identify what that's really about, right? And not to try to judge it too quickly, because a snap judgment is almost always wrong when it comes to decoding emotions, right? They're more nuanced, right? Having somebody, as I said earlier, to sound that out with and say, is that sound right? That sort of thing. I think the other one is, and this is an odd one, is that the body always wins, right? I would keep going and keep going and keep going, and I would ignore things like physical health and things like that. And I started listening to my body more, what it was actually doing, what it was telling me, right? Where was it coming from? Was it a chest pain? Was it a headache? Was it, what was this about, right? And sort of start to connect the dots more. And so I do things now I would never have done before. Like, I'll actually take a nap sometimes, right?
Woo! Yeah.
Right. Only the lazy can take naps, but that sort of thing. I think the other one is that you have to have time you have to have a regular time to unpack things. If you're spiritual, you'll call that a quiet time, or you'll call it meditation, or whatever you call it. Have to have a space where you can regularly and without fail be able to go reflect, right? Because essentially you build up debt if you don't do that, right? It's a form of debt that has to be repaid if you're not doing that, right?
Right.
That's one of the things about writing the poems is it's become a big part of the reflective exercise on my part, because literally I'm writing about whatever it is that is coming up to me that day, right? And if you're going to write a poem, it's a little bit like doing the chess version of crossword puzzles. It's really requires you be able to connect a lot of different things, experiences from the past, present. What am I feeling? How do I put all this in and hopefully the souffle rises, this sort of thing. So I guess my point of bringing that is there needs to be some expressive outlet for it whether it's journaling or writing something down, creating in some form or another, some way that you're codifying what it is now that I'm starting to feel. Right.
Right. And so, there's a book called Thrive that Ariana Huffington wrote a number of years ago that was born out of her experience of hitting her desk and, waking up in a pool of blood and doctor. And they finally just said, you're just exhausted. And there's no pill for that. So in some ways, we've created a culture that continues to lift up workaholism and grinding. And that's deemed acceptable and successful and so on and so forth until those of us hit the wall,
Yes.
And so she talks about kind of the triad is really great sleep, exercise, and meditation.
I would agree with that. I think, sleep's at the bottom of any fitness pyramid, right? So I certainly agree with that. I don't do as well as that, as I would like. I'm recovering from a sinus infection.
Okay.
But I think it has to do with how much you really, really, really value yourself.
Yes.
Because if you do, you're going to go do that workout. You're going to go take care of your body. If you do, you're going to give it the rest that it needs. And so I think a lot of those things have to do with people just simply they either don't like what they see in the mirror, they haven't accepted themselves, they don't understand or have not valued themselves in a specific way, right? When let's say you start an exercise regime and you do it for 5 years, right? And you're now, it's just habituated in this sort of thing, right? Well, you're going to look at a jelly donut in an entirely different way.
That's for sure.
Because you're going to say, well, wait a minute, I have so much invested in this level of care for myself. So I'm not going to go do this other thing, right? I think through the process, Scott was right about me. And so I hadn't accepted myself. And I think I said that in the last podcast where I playfully asked him what my problem was after we became friends, and I thought it was going to be this long considered answer laced with respect. And he goes, "Oh, Dad, that's easy. You just don't accept yourself." It's like, okay, well, there you go. That's the problem.
Yeah,
that's the problem. So what I would say is beware trying to make the complex really simple. Emotions are very, very complex. They move at the speed of light, not like thinking. You'll be in an emotional space faster than you can think about it. What I tell people, if you're trying to tease that out, right? If you're not used to being connected to it, is to insert a pause into what you're about to say or what you're about to act on. Ask yourself, like, what is that really about, right? What's the message you're telling me? Because feelings really are messengers. And you just say, what's the message there, really? And be patient with it till it comes. I'm fond of this, I'm not a Buddhist, but I'm fond of this statement. It says, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that. Just the notion of having an emotion show up and pausing for a lot of people is like, what are you talking about? Because most of us, I think the statistics are 85% are in reaction mode. And so to actually feel something and then kind of pattern interrupt yourself, pause yourself, give yourself the space to, just think about what's my next step, or who do I want to be in this moment, or what is the message that I'm meant to receive because this is showing up for me. It for a lot of people is a foreign concept.
It is. And one of the important things that the pause does is, to your point, by default, we're usually operating out of our lizard brain. Our autonomic nervous system is usually running the show on some form of autopilot with a few nudges here or there. Right. The pause allows us to operate from the what's called the medial prefrontal cortex, where it's that little grape-sized spot right there that's resolving something that's really important. It's called status. Like, what's my status in in the context that I'm in, right? How am I to be in here now with what I'm seeing? I think getting past that is really important, because you're right about the reaction is one thing, but the reaction is really a shadow of what's my status in this particular situation, and what is that inviting me or calling me to do. But when you get beyond that, when you can really fully accept yourself and your sensitivity, in my case, let's just say, then you'll be able to say things like no to things you would normally have said yes to. Be able to tell people without the incumbent emotional energy truth that is just true about a situation, right? You'll be able to tell, you'll be able to say, your wife will be able to, your wife says, does this dress make me look fat? You'll say, you might be onto something there. So
I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole.
I'm joking. That's but you get the idea, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So I do want to go back to the notion of valuing yourself. Because again, I do believe that for a lot of people, we have been raised to give our life force energy away, to say yes, to be the ones that are fixing it, taking care of it, providing service, so on and so forth. And I do think embedded in dealing with addiction, whether you're on the loved one side of the aisle or whether you're on the addict side of the aisle, it kind of cuts both ways in terms of valuing ourselves.
I just thought of this. The addict really doesn't. They really don't value themselves, right? That what they're doing is they're trying to fill up a void with something that can't be filled up with some substance, right? And so they've made a Faustian bargain, which says I want what I want without consequence, is really what they're saying. And they're not willing to do what it takes because the willingness to actually make a change must mean I own the fact that I'm actually a wonderfully made person. I'm actually have gifts. I actually have, there's the redeeming value there, right? I actually do that, right? And for over a year, I poured that into my son, like every chance I got. And it would and what I've learned is it takes a long time. Once you become aware of a gift that you have or some aspect of yourself that you value, it takes a long time to accept that and really believe it. It's a recursive process and reinforcement. It's just like working out reps, right? I really believe that. So it's not like this binary, I got it now. Right? So, my son was doing this interview for another job recently, and he was nervous about the interview. And I just said to him, I said, Scott, you are superb in the moment on your feet. Yeah. You really are. You're really good. You're really good at improvisation, and you're just really good on your feet. I mean, I said, I'm making an objective statement. And he goes, oh, really? I said, yes, you are. And so it's things like that level of reinforcement for yourself to be able to say, like in my case, my primal question, because of my family of origin upbringing, is, am I wanted? Because I wasn't. I was not wanted. And I was told that. And so I believe that in order for me to fit in any place, I had to perform, I had to do things, I had to go. But see, the truth is that shaped me in a way now where I value the presence or absence of real connection. And I want real connection for people because I know what it's like to not have it, right? As an example, right? So, so I can say about myself that what I'm really good at is I'm really good at connecting with people very quickly and in a way that it engenders, safety and trust and bringing people together so you can go off and be your original design. Everybody has an original design, and when that comes out, and when that's shepherded in a direction, powerful things happen. So,
yeah, I think about that in terms of my license plate says inspired, and it has for 3 states. And I've always believed that we were born with light and an essence, and a purpose. And it is uniquely ours, which I think we're talking the same thing here. And that the world just dumps a lot of mud and dirt and rocks and all the things on it. And then eventually we get the opportunity, I think, to clear away the dirt and debris and begin to let our light shine and our brilliance shine. And that connectivity that you're talking about is to be able to have a genuine, authentic conversation with somebody where the facades are dropped, the armor is dropped, and you can just tell your truth is a powerful place to sit and stand and walk and talk and all of it.
Right. And then to your point at the beginning, when a leader does that, when a CEO does that, that can be very powerful because they're the only ones that can send that kind of signal to the rest of the organization, right?
Right.
Because if you think about it, they got their job by navigating through, the politics and the various paths, right, of doing a particular function in a domain, right? But once you become a leader, once you become that role, then things flip. Your job is not to go and create boundaries. Your job is to be able to go and to give away what before you were holding in. Right? Before you didn't want people to see it, but now as a CEO, you've got to be able to open the kimono, so to speak, and let people see that it's okay, right, to be vulnerable about things. Because if you don't, then you're going to be telling your organization to keep wearing their fig leaves.
Yeah. And I guess the way that I interpret having partly been through this journey with Sam and the whole addictive alcohol space is that it has challenged me to lead the way from that perspective. And, I enter a relationship, first time conversations, groups, so on and so forth, from the place that that's what I want to experience. I want to have that kind of connection with people. And if they don't want to play, okay, that's their choice. But that's what I want to experience in my life. And that's not what I grew up with either. It's been learned, and a lot of rewiring has taken place to get super comfortable with being genuinely authentic with people and being my true self and all of that. So I'm curious your thoughts.
Well, I think you said a key thing, and that is that we have this false idea that the verdict on our authenticity must be unanimous. It's not. It's not for everybody. What you have to offer and your gifts and what you have to share is really not for everybody. And that's okay. But when you put that out there, right, at the beginning of a meeting or something like that, and when we formed a group, my wife and I did a new group of our neighbors were doing a Bible study, and we just put something on Facebook and said, hey, this is not your traditional thing. If you just have questions about life or whatever, it's just, and we had 8 people there, and I just kicked off the sharing and basically said, here's my journey. And by doing that, I set the bar on, okay, it's okay to go this far. If you don't have to, but it's okay to go this far with what you share. And the level of vulnerability in just 3 meetings has been, shocking, actually, because people actually they're waiting. I think they're waiting for the waters to be safe to dive in.
Right.
Somebody's got to go first. And so I think the courage to go do that is one of the things I've learned is even though I'm a flaming introvert, I've learned that it's important for me, once you figure these things out, to give back by going first.
Totally agree. And, and I spent, a number of decades, kind of like, really? Seriously? You must be joking. And what I have found is in the course of leaning in and being courageous, that what has come back to me is what you just spoke to, is I believe now that more and more people are so hungry for genuine, intimate, real conversations. They just need permission. And I believe that, my work with CEOs and business owners and execs is to give them permission to have those kinds of conversations. And when they step into that space, then they have permission to give permission to their employees and their C-suite and others. And it begins to crack whatever has been holding us back from doing that.
I agree with that. That cascade effect. I guess the caution I would offer there is you have to have people throughout layers and throughout the organization. They're your change agents, right? They're your people that you can talk to with irrespective of your title, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And you can have pretty much honest conversations with about what's really going on. These are the people that know what's going on, but they're not often talking about it. And so the reason I say that is because it's a bit of a Goldilocks challenge as a CEO. And when it comes to vulnerability, you want to be vulnerable enough to say, I don't take myself too seriously in a way that I'm inviting people to show up and really be yourself. Right.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
On the other hand, you don't want to go so far now that people feel pressure that, well, I can't do
that. Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. You're asking me to do something now and I've been over that line I've been over that line a few times where it's like, hey, it's too much. So you need people salted throughout the organization who can say, hey, that was, too hot, too cold. That was just right.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a coach that says, just give people permission to make that step 10%. Just make that 10% step. And then pretty soon it'll be 20%, because then they're going to realize, oh, the waters are safe. And they're relearning how to advance and be safe. As Stephen M. R. Covey talks about, smart trust. Right. You can't trust everybody. You shouldn't trust everybody. Right. It's learning how to actually trust smartly and create safe places where people can come and come at their own pace.
Right. Exactly. Right. And the word I would use there is elasticity. You have to be elastic enough to allow people the space they need to move at a different pace. Right. Because if you think about it, and I'm a bit of a psychometric geek, but on the spectrum of the level of the people's patience, it's a pretty wide spectrum. Some people are really patient. Some people are really, really not. So you have to allow, or as I say, when I go on motorcycle rides, you always ride to the smallest gas tank and the least amount of skill. And you got to figure out what that is in your organization, right? Who those people are going to be that are going to be a little bit, that it will take more time. So, I think I read some research recently. It bears out in my experience. It only takes anywhere between 15 to 20% of the population in a community, right, to make a significant change. And you just got to get to the people who are the connectors, throughout that system, right, and engage them in a way that's not hierarchical, right, but it's giving you a level of feedback as a leader, right, to be able to go and know how to, communicate that without going too far. You got to be able to strategically pick on people too. I mean,
yes.
I had a finance guy one time that he always had bad news. So at one staff meeting, I just said, from now on, your name is going to be Dr. Death. That's your name. Always had bad news, right? And he and I had a pretty good relationship. And so he actually changed his Slack handle name to Dr. Death. So the whole company knew him as Dr. Death from that point, right? Throughout this whole process, right? People are looking, is it safe to be me? But then what's my identity when that becomes the case, right? And so someone in the CEO position can move that along, right? When they come up with what we call shop names for people, where they go, yeah, you're describing a quality that I have, right? That is true. And I'm embracing that, and other people can see very visibly that that's being embraced, right? Although Dr. Death may be the wrong example to choose in that case. I have more positive versions of that. But
good to know. So I am curious, and this is a bigger question, is, you're at 10, 11 years, really in this journey. And I'm curious, what has been one of the biggest lessons for you, or one of the biggest lessons, one of the biggest gifts for you in this kind of decade of journey for you?
I'm going to go with a T.S. Eliot quote. The end of all searching is to arrive where you've begun and know the place for the very first time. Mm-hmm. And so I would say the biggest thing I've learned is that all along the way, when I reflected earlier about why did you make certain decisions, and you just sort of go back through history and sort of trace it back, my gut and my heart was always telling me something, and usually I was ignoring it. And I can almost always point to departure from being my true self was when I ignored that. Whatever reason, I would ignore that, right? Mm-hmm. And so I've learned, I guess, to pay attention to, I'm a man of faith, so that still small voice that's saying, okay, here's what's really going on, regardless of what you see or what you feel, or what go with your gut and what it's telling you about who you really are, and don't be afraid to do that. And I'd say the second thing I would say is just caring curiosity has an endless reward. It's just endless. Without that, I wouldn't be. I wouldn't be where I am. And, I hope that for other people. It's like, if you're not curious, you're not going to look. If you're not going to look, you're not going to see. If you're not going to see, you're not going to be able to make any kind of change. The level of resignation amongst people about my age is pretty high. They sort of like, this is the way it is. And this is hit the cruise control button. But I would say that it's like, that's a great question. I haven't thought about it in those terms, but that's a great question.
Thanks.
About for you?
I think one of them has been to change the definition of what my role is as a mom, and to go from my job is to fix it, to keep him safe, to keep him pain-free and from suffering, to realize that my job is to walk beside him as he goes through that part of his journey in life, because that's life, and to continue to assure him that no matter what happens, he's always loved. And so to hold that space consistently and wholeheartedly has been part of my journey. And I do think really truly is to own the things that I know that I need to do in order to take care of myself and allow my light to shine, and giving myself permission that I have a significant purpose in why I'm here, and that is truly important to me to live out. And the only way that's going to happen is if I take care of myself first. So those two things are kind of the ground that I think I stand on as I move forward in so much of a kind of a reinvention and redesign. And I'm totally with you in terms of, yes, follow your gut and pay attention to your gut and all of that. And then I've always been curious. So it has gotten me in hot water at times. But for the most part, it has served me so well. And I have, through the decades, met so many people who would tell me things for the first time because I was just curious and I wanted to know. And they got that sense of they were safe in telling me their truth. And so that has been an enormous gift for me to hold people's truth with sacredness and reverence, and to give them the gift of being able to speak their truth out loud and to know themselves through their own voice.
That's a great answer. Thank you for letting me turn the tables. I asked Scott last night what he would say to me before we were friends, and ostensibly to other people in the same situation, as they're going on the path. And he thought for a while and he said, endeavor to understand what part is you and what part is them.
Right.
And know the difference. Know the difference. So it sounds like you're doing that with your son.
Most definitely. I mean, our kids are just about a year apart from each other. Sam's 32, and so just this notion that he's an adult and he has his own journey, and he has his own purpose in being here. And I don't begin to know what that is. But whatever it is, I'm along for the ride to support the ups, the downs, the sideways, and all the things, and to continue to see the light that is his, despite the disease and what that looks like, in ways that it's not enabling. Because in more recent, in the last couple months, my son did relapse, and when we got to the point where we thought he would be homeless, it was like, you're resourceful. I know you can figure this out. And again, kind of holding the space for his next steps, and what that might look like when you don't know what might happen, and we're in this space, we're in a life or death situation on so many fronts. So to hold that space with courage and conviction. And then within a couple of days, he found a treatment center that would take him. I think that's part of the learning too, is to hold the space and allow and trust whatever way it goes. It's okay.
Yeah. Did I tell you I can't remember. Did I tell you the butterfly story in the last episode?
Nope.
I didn't tell you that?
Mm-mm.
It came up when you were sharing what you just did. When my son was, I think he was 6 or 7, he did this painting of a dog, and he won this art contest for his school. And they went on a field trip as a reward. And the field trip, it took us into this place where they had butterflies and plants and all these other things. And I was watching a butterfly essentially be birthed, right?
Wow.
And so you have this big larvae in a cocoon, and what it's trying to do is it's struggling to get through a very small, tiny fiber ring. It's made out of fiber, will not give. I sat and watched this thing.
Yeah.
I watched it was mightily struggling, wiggling and wiggling and wiggling. And then we get tired and stop. I mean, and it was just making such slow progress. I just thought, how's this ever going to happen?
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And I had, lots of compassion for him. I mean, this must be difficult and so on and so forth. Right. Well, and so your temptation is to cut the ring. That's what the temptation is. And the people who ran the place, I guess they were doing this as an object lesson, but they'd actually done that. And what happens is, the worst of all things is it can never become a butterfly, but it can never be what it was. And the purpose of the ring is to force the fluid out into the wings so that it can fly. And that's what the purpose of the struggle is. And so it's hard. And I applaud you for your courage to watch, that process with your son, not cut the ring.
Yeah. Well, I love that analogy. And I love that you actually witnessed that you have a visual witnessing of the power of witnessing the struggle and knowing that the struggle is what serves the butterfly. And I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that Sam's struggle with all of this is his birthing into this brilliant being that he is meant to be. And you have done the same. So.
Well, I'm very grateful. Like I said in the last, when we last talked, I wouldn't have chosen the path, but I wouldn't trade it for anything now. I wouldn't, the blessing of it. And what the bonus out of all this is, through all this thing, my wife is watching me change.
Right.
And this morning she was telling me how much I had changed and how much, we've been married for years. It's really helped our relationship that way, because she's watching me do the same thing. Go through.
Well, if they can hang in there long enough with us, they can witness the transformation.
Well, it doesn't always. Yes, and it's a deeper metaphor than it may seem, because in that process of becoming a butterfly, the larvae becomes almost 90% liquid in the process, almost 90% liquid, and so the sequencing of how that gets put back together, it's a miracle on the one hand. On the other, it's sort of a metaphor for how deep the change needs to go if you're going to embrace your true self, right? If you're going to be honest with yourself and accept things about yourself, it's really a form of surrendering to, I'm going to stop fighting it. I was fighting it for the longest time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, culturally, we haven't touched on this, and maybe we can talk again about this, but there's a book called The Paradigm Conspiracy that was written in the 90s, and it's actually supported by Hazelton. And they compare and contrast two paradigms. One is power over and control, which is the paradigm that we predominantly live in, which is about the more power you have, the more control you have, the more money you have, you win. And then it's compared in contrast with the soul honoring paradigm, which was born out of the Iroquois Confederacy at the near annihilation of Northeast tribes. And that was out of the 1500s. And so when I read that in the 1990s, I was doing a lot of traveling then, and I would go into bookstores and I would wait for a book to pick me. And that was one of the books that picked me. It so resonated with me that really my work has been about soul honoring. Each exec I work with, each, C-suite group that I work with, is to honor their souls first and allow for their brilliance to rise and shine. And I don't, it doesn't always happen. And I'm okay, because the ones that do go through the chrysalis and come out through, I don't know that it gets any better than that.
No, it doesn't. And you're fortunate to be able to have those connections and witness that kind of transformation. It's more rare in my experience. I think, broadly speaking, if we could just get people to stop treating other people and ourselves like objects,
yes,
then that would be a huge change. In fact, there's an entire chapter in my book that's just about object versus relationship. What is the difference, right? So it's jealous of your work. I'd love to say more about myself.
Well, we do need to wrap up. And so what I would say is I would love to have you come back when you're closer to the book release, because this is what your book is all about, is all part of this journey. And it is about creating safe cultures. And we just had to create our own safety first and then move out from that space. And so again, you are exhibiting that disruptor, innovator, and change agent that is so endemic to who you are. And so I'm super excited about this book and what you have to say.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate your deft questioning there. You've asked me a few questions I don't normally get, but I do have one last from you, and that is, what have you learned about me in this conversation? You
have continued to be who you were in the first conversation, which is immensely thoughtful, global in your thinking. It's all centered in heart, and you care so deeply about people. And now you have permission to walk that walk in a way that is extraordinarily powerful. And I'm not sure that you necessarily know how powerful you are in this walk that you're walking, which is why I want to keep having these conversations, because you bring a level of life experience and on so many fronts that gives people permission to change and to step into the truth about who they really are. And that's an enormous gift. Thank you. Thank you. I ask that question routinely. My wife hates it, but it's a depth of connection question. And I can say that, your answer has just been really affirming. Great. You're probably right. I probably probably am not appreciating all that's there, but that's fine. So thank you so much, Gail. That's very kind of you. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm a fan. Well, I love talking to you. I mean, I don't get to have these conversations very often, but it's great to get in the sandbox and to be able to care about people with impunity. Okay, well, I will. We'll wrap it up. And again, deep gratitude, and we will talk again later, probably November, December, if you are on track. Blessings to you. Have a great summer on your motorcycle and all the things that you've got going on. And we'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you. You take care as well.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us in this episode. We hope this discussion gives you the empowerment you need during these challenging times. Remember, there is always light after darkness. For more inspiring conversations like this one, subscribe to the show at voicesencourage.com/podcast. We encourage you to share with your friends and family going through similar situations so we can continue to build a strong community of hope and possibility. Start your life-changing journey today. Join our community at voicesencourage.com.